In 2008, New Apostolic Reformation prophet and self-proclaimed faith healer Todd Bentley came to the attention of the Southern Poverty Law Center, a watchdog organization that advocates for civil rights and opposes hate-based ideologies. Bentley drew large crowds to his revivals, which were held in rented baseball stadiums, arenas, and airport hangars, costing as much as $15,000 per day. His audiences, often numbering in the tens of thousands and including pastors, supported his extraordinary claims, such as visions of King David and the Apostle Paul in heaven. At the time, many who were familiar with Bentley's distinctive appearance, featuring tattoos, piercings, and a unique entourage, might have wondered why the Southern Poverty Law Center raised concerns about him. Before facing allegations of personal misconduct, including accusations of infidelity and substance misuse, Bentley was respected and supported by influential leaders in the New Apostolic Reformation. One of the Southern Poverty Law Center's concerns stemmed from Bentley's prominent tattoo of military dog tags on his chest. The tags featured the phrase, "Joel's Army," which the center identified as a reference to militant themes within certain theological circles. Given Bentley's title of prophet within the New Apostolic Reformation, the tattoo was interpreted as symbolic of a broader movement within theocratic ideologies. The Southern Poverty Law Center recognized Joel's Army as a concept rooted in the Christian identity movement, which emerged in the late 1940s and 50s and intersected with figures such as William Branham during the Latter-Rain Revival of 1948. While the Southern Poverty Law Center did not directly address William Branham's associations with divisive figures, it noted his controversial teachings, including the serpent seed doctrine. According to scholar Michael Barkun in his book, Religion and the Racist Right, The Origins of the Christian Identity Movement, Branham's teachings aligned with a broader narrative tied to divisive interpretations of Scripture. Barkun argued that Branham's doctrine was used to challenge mainstream religious thought and intellectualism. The Southern Poverty Law Center further traced the lineage of the Manifest Sons of God doctrine through prominent figures and movements, including John Wimber's Vineyard Movement, Lou Engle's The Call, Bob Jones and the Kansas City Fellowship, and Mike Bickle, founder of the International House of Prayer. It noted that these groups were aware of how their theology was perceived within the wider Christian community. They noted, quote, "The Kansas City Fellowship remains in operation and has served as a farm team for many of the all-stars of the Joel's Army movement. Those larger-than-life figures include John Wimber, the founder of a California megachurch, the Vineyard, who before his death in 1997 proclaimed that Joel's Army would not only conquer the earth, but defeat death itself. Lou Engle founded The Call based on the Joel's Army visions that KCF prophet Bob Jones, not to be confused with Bob Jones III of Bob Jones University, received while at KCF. Mike Bickle, another KCF member, stayed in Kansas City to form the International House of Prayer. The history of these movements was well known among New Apostolic Reformation leaders. Bickle openly told his followers that the Joel's Army doctrine originated from latter-rain evangelist Paul Cain. Cain considered himself a devout proponent of the Manifest Sons of God and Joel's Army doctrines, claiming to have seen the words Joel's Army in Training written in the sky above Kansas City. Bickle, Cain, and other leaders, including John Wimber and Jack Deere, discussed these themes in the late 1980s. How did the New Apostolic Reformation come to adopt doctrines that have been flagged as problematic by organizations like the Southern Poverty Law Center? To answer this, it is necessary to examine the origins of the Latter-Rain Revival and its connections to related movements. Not long after Gerald Burton Winrod, a leader in the Christian identity movement, preached at Amy Semple McPherson's Angelus Temple, McPherson traveled to Canada to oversee the promotion of church leaders. Among those appointed was Reverend Herrick Holt, who became a superintendent for the Foursquare Church in Saskatchewan. Shortly afterward, Holt initiated an ambitious project to establish an orphanage and schools, creating what would later be known as the Sharon Orphanage, the epicenter of the Latter-Rain Revival. Holt selected George Houghton, a convert to divisive Christian identity doctrines, as president of the orphanage. Haughton's writings expressed exclusionary views that he presented as religious teachings, further polarizing theological discussions of the time. William Branham, a prominent revivalist, toured Canada during this period. His events, characterized by dramatic displays such as moving objects and alleged miraculous healings, drew significant attention. Reports later questioned the authenticity of some of Branham's claims, but his charismatic persona continued to captivate audiences. By 1947, Branham had become a sought-after figure in Pentecostal circles, particularly after stories spread about his supposed ability to perform extraordinary acts. Before reports challenging Branham's healing claims surfaced in November 1947, the Sharon Orphanage Bible School had already sparked a revival. Revivalists such as Branham and Franklin Hall, known for his teachings on prayer and fasting, inspired widespread enthusiasm among Pentecostals, leading participants to believe they were experiencing a movement surpassing the Azusa Street revival of 1906. Pentecostals often reference the Old Testament book of Joel, chapter 2, to interpret their experiences. The prophecy, which describes rains that bring an end to famine, was seen as symbolic of spiritual renewal. Early Pentecostals associated their revival with these former and latter rains. By the mid-20th century, however, interpretations of Joel's prophecy had shifted under the influence of militant themes from Christian identity. Revivalists focused on phrases like, "my great army," misunderstanding the biblical reference to a swarm of locusts as a description of a divine human army. Passages from the New Testament, including Romans chapter 8 and Ephesians chapter 4, were similarly reinterpreted. Where traditional Christians saw these verses as describing the grace of God and the structure of the church, latter rain leaders emphasized concepts of hierarchy and divine power. This reinterpretation laid the groundwork for doctrines such as the fivefold ministry, which categorized apostles, prophets, evangelists, pastors, and teachers as distinct ranks within Joel's army. As the movement expanded, disagreements among leaders over theology and practices became increasingly common. By September 1949, the Assemblies of God officially condemned the latter rain movement, describing it as incompatible with sound theology. However, this did not stop its spread. Independent groups emerged, seeking freedom from denominational oversight. Leaders like Jim Jones, later associated with tragic events in Jonestown, were influenced by these movements and their teachings. Why did such ideologies gain traction in North America during this period? And why did so many adopt the concept of an exclusive, militant Christian army? To explore these questions, we must examine other movements that intersected with Christian identity theology.